The restaurants you love, the food you crave, and the people that make it all happen. We tell their stories on the Paper Trails podcast with Albemarle Paper Supply.
What's going on, guys? How are you? Nick Calagiro-Mitros, and we are back with the Paper Trails podcast, Season 3, Episode 4, and we are here at Puerta, brand new location, brand new restaurant in Elizabeth, in Charlotte, and I'm super pumped to have executive chef RJ Corley here. I know him as RJ. I don't, but yeah, very excited to sit down with executive chef to just talk about the restaurant, his experience, his history and food, how he got into the space, and so very, very pumped to have RJ on with us, and so appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm very excited to go through your background. I know we met several weeks ago and had a blast talking about just your experiences, New York, different restaurants, making your way down here. So very excited to let everybody know about who the exec chef is here, what you guys are doing here at Puerta, and then also a little bit of backstory on how you guys ended up here. So appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And so maybe let's start, RJ, just going back a little bit, man. How did you get into cooking? Have you always been into cooking? Was your family into cooking? Let's get a little bit of history for everybody about how you ended up here.
So I first started in real restaurants, I guess, like towards the end of high school.
Okay. Where are you from?
Frederick, Maryland, so Western Maryland.
Okay.
Started working at Outback Steakhouse. I started as a busboy.
Okay.
I tried to go play sports in college. That didn't necessarily work out. Didn't really have any plans moving forward, and my buddy was a busboy at Outback, so it was good money. So I did that for a few months, and then I spoke Spanish. I started learning Spanish early on. Okay. So I kind of hung out in the back house probably more than I should have, just talking with the dishwashers and the cooks and stuff like that.
Sure.
And I put it in my one manager's ear as I was like, I'd love to be back there. And she was like, you're going to have to start in the dish pit. You're going to make a lot less money. And I was like, I don't care. It's, I'm 17, 18 years old. Didn't matter. So yeah, I moved to the back of the house there as a dishwasher.
Okay.
Then I got my butt kicked every night for a couple months, and then they moved me to AM prep. Worked that for a few more months, and then that's when I decided that I wanted to actually give it a shot.
Yeah.
So I applied for Johnson Wales, came down here to Charlotte to culinary school.
Nice.
It's kind of serendipitous because like as a little kid, I spent a lot of time on holidays and stuff in the kitchen with my great Aunt Mary, and my great uncle. They owned a restaurant supply store in like central West Virginia. And as a little kid, I remember going in there and just thinking everything was a toy. There was one point in time for Christmas, I wanted this set of like speed pour tops that were all the MLB baseball helmets.
Okay.
Like why would an 8-year-old need that? But like for some reason I wanted it.
Yeah.
And I wanted a chef hat and all like a chef coat. And it just all seemed cool to me then.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes sense now, I guess.
Now so it's so interesting, RJ, that a lot of chefs that we speak to and have on the pod, a lot of them start just in the dish pit, man. Like just learning every part of the, and obviously it's just super underappreciated part, but it's so necessary to have, good people in all parts of the kitchen. But anyway, I love that. Now, how did you know about Johnson and Wales? Like, did you know that you wanted to come down here? Did you know that you wanted to go to culinary school? How did that all come about?
Well, I kind of had, like during that whole time period of me working at Outback Steakhouse and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I tried community college for a little bit up in Frederick, Maryland, and I did like a semester. I think I showed up to like 30% of my classes, and I was just over it. I was like, I don't want to do this. Yeah. And I had one of my best friend's older brothers, and another, they were just 1 year older than us. They were going to Le Cordon Bleu in, I think, Scottsdale, Arizona. And they had just like graduated from there, and they went and did like 6 months in Antigua Islands or somewhere, down in that area. Yeah. And then they'd come back and, just kind of like cooking food with them at cookouts and stuff and talking about their experience in school and stuff. It seemed like something that would be good for me. Okay. So I just kind of like late night, one night, Google searched culinary schools. I didn't know anything about Johnson Wales. Didn't know anything about Charlotte really. But then when I got to the Johnson Wales website, because at that time I was like, I had no really desire to like stay in the Mid-Atlantic or the Northeast. I wanted to kind of go somewhere new, and I saw they had a Charlotte campus like getting ready to open. Nice. And I was like, well, that'd be kind of cool, I'd be down in the South and not too far from home, but yet far enough from home to be on my own.
Close enough but far enough.
Yeah, and when I applied, then they called us the next day and they were like, classes start in like 4 weeks. They're like, so if you really want to do this, you need to come down immediately to enroll and everything. So my grandfather was like, if this is what you want to do, then, let's go for it.
Love that. Now are there question about just experience at Outback and just, and any restaurant for that matter, if anyone's looking to get into the space, what are some things that you learned from that first experience, getting into the kitchen, not knowing anything, and then dish pit, and then starting to, do the AM prep and all that stuff. What are some things that you remember? Did you have anybody there kind of teaching you? Like, did you have anybody? What was that like?
I had a wild pack of El Salvadorians that pretty much brought me up in the kitchen. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that, even when I started as a busboy, like I had no general idea or theory about how busy I was going to be. First day as a busboy, it was, especially Outback, they have those big mugs. It was figuring out how to carry 8 of those at a time. And you're put in situations where, especially at that age, you're like, there's no human way that I can do what you're asking me to do right now. And then that's going to continue basically for the rest of your life. But you just have to figure out a way to deal with it. And I remember distinctly my first day as a prep cook, and I was pumped to start as a prep cook. I showed up, chili pepper chef pants, I was ready to go, man. And I walk in, and they were basically in Spanish, there's a wall of boxes of potatoes. And they're like, oh yeah, today you're gonna cut, wash, and blanch, 500 pounds. And tomorrow you're gonna do 500 pounds, but then on Friday you're gonna do 1,000 pounds. And I was like, all right, I get it, jokes on the new guy. Yeah. They're like, no, seriously. They were like, sometimes on Saturday you have to do 2,000 pounds. And I was just flabbergasted of how I was supposed to do that, just in an 8-hour span. And then I spent all day doing those 500 pounds of potatoes, because again, I think I was just turned 18. I was 18 and a half maybe. Yeah. I spent all day doing that, and then I was exhausted by the end of it. And all the guys were like, all right, cool, so good job on the potatoes. Yeah. However, here's the rest of the list you were supposed to do today. They're like, we took care of it for today, but tomorrow you need to. I was trying to find that rhythm of how do you have 3 to 4 different things going at one time? How am I whipping 30 pounds of butter while cutting and blanching his potatoes, while defrosting shrimp, while whatever it may be. But you can't just have one thing going at a time. And fortunately for me, I've been able to use that not just from the kitchens, but in the rest of my life, just to be able to multitask pretty severely.
I was gonna say, I feel like that is a critical component to the food industry, or maybe hospitality in general, is just the importance of multitasking. Yeah. If you're not able to figure out pretty quick how to multitask,
you're not gonna make it.
It's over. Yeah, it's over. You're not getting out of training.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you, and that's where it starts. As a prep cook, if you can't have 4 or 5 items working at one point in time, then when you're on the line, you're probably not gonna be able to cook off 2-3 Dover soles, a couple pieces of duck breast, sauteing scallops, whatever it may be. You're gonna have to constantly have 6-7 timers going in your head at once. Wow. So
love it. Okay, so Maryland, grew up, Outback, first experience. Yep. Go online, Johnson & Wales, you come down. Yep. All right, which isn't it serendipitous that you're back down here in Charlotte?
Yeah, I've actually left Charlotte twice, and I just keep coming back.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in school. What was that experience like? For anybody has not been in a culinary school, what's it like? What are you learning? Knife skills, different types of techniques. What are some things that you're able to take from culinary school?
My first culinary lab at Johnson Wales, and my first labs were my first trimester, was FFP, the fundamentals of food production. Okay. So I think we did eggs for 4 days, something like that, just eggs and breakfast foods. That whole first year, I would pretty much chalk up to, they're just kind of trying to teach you how to hold yourself in a kitchen in a professional restaurant. And they're trying to instill right out the gate the standard of cleanliness, your uniform, having your creases, being clean shaven, stuff like that. Realistically for me, I don't think I really understood what I could make out of this career or what was gonna come until probably about a year after culinary school.
Okay.
Like when I was in culinary school, again, I was young, and I was, part of me was like, oh, like not just going to a regular college, I'm going to like a college full of chefs, so this should be a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just kind of like, I wouldn't say floated my way by, but like I got through it.
Okay.
Not with really the understanding, because I came from a small town in like the Appalachian Mountains, so a lot of the stuff I was seeing, talking about caviar and foie gras and really even oysters, like that was something I had never really been exposed to before.
Okay.
So there was a period of time in my life where I was like, I wish I could go back to culinary school, because I knew what questions to ask, or while I was in there, I didn't necessarily know.
Gotcha. Okay.
I was just trying to like retain knowledge and figure it out along the way. But yeah, it wasn't until I started working with Laurent Tournadel that it really like captured my brain of like, okay, there's more to this than what I thought.
So let's chat about that. So you graduate.
So graduate,
and where do you go? Like, what's the first?
I tried to get into. I really wanted to get into fine dining because I just found it curious, and it was something. Like I said, I'd never been around. I didn't grow up going to eat at nice restaurants or anything like that. Like, I think Grandpa took me to like the Ambets quite a lot growing up. So a lot of Celeste pizza for ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would try to get into fine dining, but of course back then we're talking 2007, 2008. There weren't a large amount of fine dining restaurants in Charlotte, and the ones that were there, it was kind of hard to get into because I had little to zero experience. I had Outback, I had like Maggiano's, had a couple other little like small operations, but nothing that anyone was really willing to be like, yeah, kid, come on.
Yeah.
So I didn't know how to get in there, and then I traveled a little bit summer of 2009, and then when I got back into Charlotte, my one friend was looking at like Craigslist for jobs, and we saw, New York City Steakhouse, BLT Steak, which of course that's all I never heard of. Applied, got hired. It's Axel, who was the executive chef de cuisine there at that time, like who opened the restaurant. We always kid that because he had called and left me a voicemail, and I had no idea who this guy was, and I thought it was one of my buddies messing with me, so I called him back and was like, who is this? And he's like, yeah, it's Chef Axel. If you want the job, training starts Tuesday, September the 9th. And I'm pretty sure for the first 6 months of that job, it was an immediate oh, this is real.
Just shock.
Oh, humongous culture shock. I was still in the belief system of restaurants it was just a job, and then everyone partied afterwards or whatever. And I came in there, and this was in BLT Steak's prime era. So when I walked in, there was close to 100 cooks there.
Wow.
Trying to get maybe 25 full-time positions. May have been less, but as a young man, it seemed like a lot of people were in there, and people were dropping like flies.
Yeah.
Because they had 4 or 5 pretty heavy hitter corporate chefs in there at the time.
Okay.
You had a guy in there who had brought Le Cirque back up to 3 stars, and you had guys in there who'd worked for Jean Georges for a number of years, and they were all pretty intense. And I remember my little Wusthof knife was just not cutting it. I got my chives thrown out every single day, and it was literally I had a conversation with a couple of the chefs day 5, and it was hey man, we like you, you're fun to be around.
Okay.
You seem to have a good work ethic, but if you want to do this, you need to really go home tonight and take this seriously.
Wow.
So I went home that night, no beers, none of that.
Did that really kind of oh, you know what? I mean,
yeah, that was kind of the turning point. It was all right, it's go time. Everything I've wanted, I have.
Okay.
Let's not screw this up.
Good for that guy for just kind of pulling you aside and talking to you, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, because the rest of them were just screaming at me. But yeah, that was definitely the turning point, and just the fact that this can be not just a job, that I can actually make something of this.
Yeah.
And then I went on and I worked with Chef Axel for, on and off. That was 2009, so on and off about 12 years.
Wow.
10 to 12 years,
What
yeah.
was that like? Just
it was good. He was obviously 100% my mentor. We got really close, professionally and personally.
Yeah.
We moved from Charlotte to Philadelphia, and we worked for Steven Starr together, which that was kind of wild because at that time that restaurant we were at was kind of being rebuilt or refocused a little bit.
Okay.
So at one point in time there was 4 or 5 chefs in there that had some really big knowledge. I worked with one guy that was a sous chef there, and he had been a corporate sous for Jean-Georges in Vegas for like 6 years or something. I got pushed on really hard in that restaurant. That was like my actual last line cook position was in Philly. I was chef de partie, and it was like, you're not a sous chef, you're not really a line cook, you're kind of in the middle. So it's like anything that anyone else doesn't want to do is going to be on you. And at the same time, like, if your station's not set up and the people around you stations aren't set up for service, like, you're the one that's going to answer for it.
Okay.
So that was probably another turning point for me at that time. Like, I really got deep into it then. Like, I mean, that was the same time that, like, this movie, A Matter of Taste, which was a documentary about Paul Liebrandt, came out. And I kind of like, yeah, it's hard to find now, but if you find it, it's a good movie. It kind of like, that kind of got me into wanting to do like molecular gastronomy and that sort of thing. And then from there we went to Chicago, and from Chicago to New York City, which New York City was my ultimate goal. Was because I didn't have it in the cards to go work in Europe. So I was like, well, the best I could do is go to New York City. So we got to sit and did that for a few years. And
with Axel?
Yeah.
So you're following your mentor chef.
Yeah, because we were in Philly. Axel and I were in Philly with Steven Starr, and then Laurent Tournadel of BLT had kind of gone through some things, and then he started a new company, LT Signature. So we went to Chicago to open a BLT American Brasserie.
What was that like, Chicago and that whole experience?
I mean, Chicago was wild because, every city I went to was getting bigger and bigger. Coming from Western Maryland down to here wasn't that big of a jump, but it was still a bigger jump than I was used to. And then from here to Philly, walking to work every day and stuff like that, and then going to Chicago where I lived on the north side, so I had to take the red line every day. Yeah, it was intense, and that was a really big restaurant, and that restaurant ended up not succeeding. We closed doors like about 6 to 8 months after opening, which was kind of a good lesson to learn. I was
going to say, is there anything that stands out to you that you learned from that?
The big thing was, because I was 24 at that time, so the big lesson was that, like, even if you do everything right, sometimes it's still not going to work out. Like, that was just a really big restaurant. The lease was really high. There had been a previous restaurant in there that also hadn't succeeded. So it's like, even if the food's good, the service is good, the cocktails are good, sometimes it's not going to work, So that was, I had to take that one on the chin. But then I got the opportunity to open kind of another Spanish restaurant. It was more like Southern Spain, San Sebastian style. And it was massive. All the restaurants in Chicago that I worked at or was around were really, really big restaurants. So that taught me just the fact that you're never going to be done. There's always stuff to do. And it was a team of like 4 sous chefs, a CDC and an EC at the second restaurant that I worked at in Chicago. And we were busy. We were cranking. We were doing 400 covers a night in the one part of the restaurant, and then we had like a pincho bar attached to it that did another 300 covers or whatever.
Wow.
So it was a lot, which I think that was good. It prepared me to go to New York City and just see that race, that marathon that is. So.
Did you, as you're traveling to these different cities, including New York, are you seeing like different styles of food? Are you seeing different types of people, or like is like the people in Philadelphia just tastes and just their nuances a little different than Chicago, New York? Are you seeing that or not yet, or how was that?
Yeah, kind of. I think a lot of it was not just geographically why it was changing, but also like different eras and like points in like the culinary industry. When I was in Philly, Philly is going to be Philly till the end of times, sense. And Philadelphia was one of like my favorite places that I lived. I'm still super close to a lot of the people that I met and worked with while I lived there. I staged a little bit at Vetri, not his main restaurant, but one of his like smaller, top of his small plates restaurants. It was like, it wasn't what Chicago was, but I was in Chicago in like 2011, 2012, where it was just the molecular heyday back then. Even if like you weren't good at it, people were still trying to do it. But Chicago just had definitely a different standard, like a higher, like there was, at that point in time, it was almost like a breeding ground for like the next forefront of chefs. You know, you had Grant Achatz there, you had Graham Elliott there, you had Paul Kahn, which I was actually talking to someone about yesterday. Like Paul Kahn, I don't remember what all of his restaurants are still there, but like Blackbird, I used to go to Blackbird all the time. I'd spend like half a paycheck just to go eat dinner at Blackbird. It was like one of the most incredible meals and experiences I thought I'd ever have. It's not around anymore. But it was, yeah, I mean, it was just incredible. And then I got to New York, and again, that's the other thing too, is like I was going like steakhouse to steakhouse to like brasserie to like Spanish tapas back to steakhouse. But yeah, I feel like in all of my travels, Chicago probably had some of the most like groundbreaking new stuff. Some of the techniques I learned there I still use today that I probably wouldn't have learned if I wasn't there. I got to connect with some more like higher up chefs there just through some of the people I worked with.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so now you're in New York.
Got to New York City. You know, I drove into New York City in a rental car, and I hadn't driven a car in probably like 2 years or more. Because in Philadelphia I had a car, but I never moved it. In Chicago I didn't even have a car. So I drove into Manhattan. I was driving to Axel's apartment to like drop off my stuff, and then I was going to drop off the rental car. And I remember like he lived on the Upper East Side, and I've never even been in New York City before.
Okay.
And I'm driving through like the Midtown area and just completely freaking out. I'm like on the phone with him. I'm like, I don't know where to go. I was like, I need you to like just come outside and get in the car and drive for me. And he said, no, you'll be fine. So like once we got the car parked, got situated at his house, we went and ate at, we didn't eat at Danielle. We ate, I think it's like Bistro Balud. Okay. We ate at one of Danielle's restaurants that night. And again, it was like, you know, just a little kid from a small mountain town, like just wearing my suit jacket at the table, like afraid to take it off. Like didn't want to, you know, do anything weird. And then the first day, like I moved there to be executive sous at STK, their flagship store in meatpacking. I think that literally for the first month, at least, New York City to me was just like, oh my God, this place is a monster.
Overwhelming.
Oh yeah, and I mean, Sandy happened, like, I got there, I want to say on a Sunday or Monday, and like we went out to dinner that night. I started to work the next day. Left work that day, went to my apartment. Hadn't even been in my apartment yet. Got to my apartment, met my roommates, like these strangers I'd never known before in my life that I'm going to be living with now. Yeah. They helped me get my stuff up, and then all my stuff from Chicago arrived the next day, and yeah, I just kind of worked that whole week. And then I got a call that Sunday morning from Axel, and he was like, hey, can you go to the restaurant real quick and make sure that everything on the rooftop is like either down or move stuff inside if you have to. And I'm like, we have a rooftop? Because they had already closed the rooftop for that season when I got there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was Sandy. Sandy was coming.
Okay.
So then enter my second week in New York City, and like power's out, bridges are closed, trains are shut down.
Wow.
So I'm just like, all right, like, so it took me a little bit to get acclimated there. But then once I got acclimated, I was like, oh, this is just like a bigger Philadelphia almost. So I loved it. I mean, and that STK was doing crazy volume. I mean, you were hitting 350 on a Friday, Saturday night without a problem. You know, you were probably doing closer to 4 sometimes. And then Axel ended up going to become the executive chef at the Midtown location, and I kind of stepped into a chef de cuisine role.
Okay. What was that like?
It was a lot. I didn't have any sous at the time, so it was kind of like me, and then I had one receiver. So it was a lot, and I don't know if I was necessarily ready for that position. I didn't take a day off for like 2.5 straight months. So I got burnt out pretty quick, and then, you know, tempers start to flare and stuff starts to go on, and ended up, you know, about a year later, I ended up leaving there. Yeah. It was just a lot to handle, a lot to deal with, and again, I was only 25, maybe 26 then. Yeah. So it was a lot.
I'm sure you learned a ton though, just, you know, maybe not being 100% ready for the position, but stepping into it and then learning kind of a long way. Because, I mean, I'm sure there's people listening to this, Chef, that maybe, you know, want to get a promotion, but they're not sure if they're ready for the promotion, or there's, it's just, the unknown is always scary. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like if you're ready or you're not ready, like sometimes you just gotta step and go. And it's like you're gonna swing and miss. Like a slogan I always say is like no one bats 1,000. You know, like if you look at professional baseball players, they get paid millions and millions of dollars to miss 700, 800 pitches.
Yeah.
You know, if we miss a couple here and there, it's not that big of a deal. You know, like we're gonna slip, we're gonna fall.
Yeah.
It matters if you get back up and how you get back up. You know, like so the recovery is what matters. You know.
100%. I agree. It's a great piece of advice for anybody that is a little bit kind of nervous, anxious, not sure about the next step in their life. I'm not sure, got to take this promotion, I don't know exactly how to fill these shoes. My boss is leaving. It's like, what, bro, you will figure it out.
Yeah.
Things will come to you. You know what I mean? I'm sure, even though, you just didn't know exactly, I'm sure, every step of that role, you learned it.
Yeah.
Because you had to.
Yeah, another choice. I mean, the good thing is that kind of from day one working with Axel, like he put a lot of pressure on me from day one, and he kind of like taught me a lot of the things that maybe if you were a sous chef or a line cook going into sous, into exec sous, into CC, maybe you wouldn't get that kind of attention from the EC. But like he spent a lot of time on me. Nature versus nurture for sure. I definitely in moments got it harder than anyone else did, but that's because he wanted me to succeed the most.
That's awesome.
But yeah, he prepared me a lot for it. And I mean, him and I were the first chefs to change that menu there in almost 7 years. So that was their flagship store, and they hadn't really changed a lot of stuff. And their corporate chef was a former BLT corporate chef. So we all knew each other, so they kind of gave trust in a lot of things.
Nice.
But yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so step into that role. You're there for a year.
Yeah.
And then you stay in New York.
Yeah, Axel ended up leaving STK to go work. Well, he ran like a small little tasting menu in Brooklyn for a little bit.
Okay.
But then a former BLT chef, this guy Matthew Palladino, he owned the Bowery Diner on the Lower East Side.
Okay.
So we ended up going to work for him. He was getting ready to transition the diner from a diner to like a French brasserie. So we spent like 6-8 months. I spent literally half my time in like the basement doing R&D for all this old world charcuterie, and the other half of my time upstairs like running the diner during service.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like you would think a diner like it's a diner, but this guy was doing like old world like French technique into diner food. Like he's grinding his own lamb for his Mercase burger, and I mean, remember the pancake recipe was like a 20-step pancake batter recipe, and his corned beef.
Your normal diner?
No, not at all. I mean, he was brining briskets for 2 weeks and smoking them for 24 hours for like the pastrami sandwiches. Like everyone, when you think of New York City and you think of like delicatessen, you think Cat's Deli.
Yeah.
But like he was executing a pastrami sandwich that was right there with Cat's Deli in this small little diner. It was awesome for me because I always wanted to learn a lot of those like old world French techniques of like the charcuterie and stuff like that, and making pâté en croûte. And I mean, how else do you do it other than in a basement in New York City with the French guy? And I mean, he was very disciplined. Like I'm a smoker, I was not allowed to take smoke breaks.
Wow.
If you were like 1 minute late, you were late for like the rest of that day.
Yeah.
In his head, you were the late one.
Yeah.
He was very strict. But again, that just helped teach me the standard, like if it's not right, don't do it. If it's not right, don't sell it.
Wow.
And then just, you gotta push. And yeah, sometimes you can take the easy way out.
Yeah.
Like there's the easy way and there's the hard way. And the easy way is easier, but the hard way is going to create a better product at the end of the day.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like even with the experience that you already had, there's a lot of new things that you learned working for this chef, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And anything else that stand out to you that like just the R&D or the execution? I mean, anything else that stands out to you? I mean,
a lot of it for me was just so new of like because I was still kind of in that like that one-dimensional like young chef, savory chef mode of like not having to like just do this to taste, but like doing that charcuterie work and being like, oh, I need to weigh all this stuff out, doing figuring out like how much pink salt, 28 grams per kilo. and just the fine and mute attention to detail. And like we still had fun in that kitchen. I remember it was like the night before Thanksgiving. We tried to basically do like a dudine out of our turkeys. So we like deboned the whole turkey. We made like pate and rubbed the inside of the turkey with old country pate, and then rolled it up, trussed it. It was delicious. But also while doing that, we were working on another pate, like pate compagna. One of the prep cooks, I forget what exactly it was he did wrong. He either he cubed the fat back, or he like grinded it too small, I think maybe was what it was. Then chef was like, all right, we're just gonna make a bunch of rillette. He's like, we can't use this in that pate. It's gonna melt out. He's like, but we'll just make a bunch of rillette. And we made so much rillette that it's like 1:30 in the morning. We're still in there prepping for Thanksgiving the next day, and it's just like me, him, and Axel, and we ended up making like pigs out of the rillette. Like we had like a whole entire face of the pig, and used like juniper berries for the eyes, and like at one point in time I might have put a cigarette smell. Yeah, I mean we still had fun even though like we were working a lot, and then after that, me and Axel went to try to open our own restaurant, and unfortunately our financial partners, I don't think were necessarily aware of like what the overhead to do a really high-end like farm to table. For Axel and I, like once he got me to a certain point, our biggest thing was that we wanted to do as not just like farm to table. I hate saying that because we grew up into something that I don't think that like Alice Waters was looking for or whatever, Yeah, like we wanted to just do like really exclusively seasonal and local stuff. And it was kind of like we had some partners that were like, like to eat at good restaurants, have a good amount of money, let's open one. And it was a beautiful build out. It was right there in Tribeca by One World Trade Center and everything. And just the overhead was too much. So then we ended up leaving there. By this point in time, I'm pretty tired. We've moved a lot and we've opened several restaurants now. So I took a year off of cooking. I was like in my mid-20s, and I was like, I don't even know if this is really something I want to continue to do. So I became a bike messenger, and I was a bike messenger in New York City for just under a year. Bike messenger? I rode a bicycle around Manhattan and Brooklyn and it was kind of cool because as a chef, I'd only seen certain sections of the city. Like where I live, where I work, maybe places you go out at. But as a messenger, I was all over the 5 boroughs. Spent a lot of time on West Side Highway. I did a lot of runs from like One World Trade Center up into the Midtown area. Worked for this company, Zipments, and I was lucky enough to be on this team of great guys. I was only 26, I think, at this time. Maybe I was still 25.
Experience.
Yeah, in like 7 years. Yeah.
I feel like that. I mean, you traveled a lot. You've opened restaurants. You've learned a ton. I mean, I feel like by 26, you have, what people, haven't had in a lifetime probably.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And working as a messenger just kind of added to that because you're on the streets in New York. You're battling, the traffic, the cabs, pedestrians. Most of the city kind of looks down on you. But I loved it. Like the guys I rode with, we always used to joke like, "Oh, best job I ever had," because you're really free. You're out there on a bike. You have like a radio, and you're getting jobs dispatched. You're calling jobs. But really, there's no real like boss that you're reporting to. Now there's good things and bad things with that. Like you don't have an office, so like you got to go to the bathroom, and you're in the middle of Manhattan. You got to find a bathroom. So. I still have it on my phone, like a little note of all the different bathroom codes for different buildings. And people would radio, be like, "Hey, does somebody remember the bathroom code for the Kaleidoscope building?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, it's 1042 or whatever."
That's hilarious.
It was awesome. And I rode. What was fun is I started as a messenger. Probably the worst time to start. I started like in the middle of October, so right as winter's hitting. So I spent like the first 4 or 5 months I was on a bike, just soaking wet, cold. Probably drank more coffee that winter than I ever have in my life. And then springtime came, and it was like everyone, all the people that like wanted to be a messenger or whatever, all the young kids, they come out and they kind of like take a lot of the jobs. But everyone on my team, we'd made money during the wintertime when no one wanted to ride.
Gotcha.
So we were able to kind of just chill, hang out. And then I left New York City in the spring of 2015.
Okay. for back here?
Yeah, for back here. And I wasn't working in kitchens for a while.
Okay.
Just kind of trying to get
Little break.
Yeah, to spend some time with my grandfather. He moved down here with me and just kind of spent some time with him. I did some traveling that summer.
I think, RJ, unless you've been in the restaurant, it's a very stressful environment.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm talking about like the levels that I've worked. I can't imagine, opening restaurants and fine dining and having these, executive chefs yelling at you and
Yeah, I definitely came up in the last of that generation of, just being. It sounds bad, but like for me, I responded well to it. I don't know if it's because I played sports growing up or because the guy that raised me was born in the 30s or what it was. But like getting screamed at for me, it was just like the we chef, no chef mentality. I thrived for it, and like. Yeah, there were definitely moments where it was like, God, this guy could just leave me alone for like 20 minutes. Yeah, but that's not how it works now. Yeah. And there's definitely components of that shouldn't have gone on back then. Gotcha. But I don't know if I would be where I am today without it. I kind of needed it. I watched and worked with people around me that they couldn't take it, and I watched people crumble because of it. Mm-hmm. And I definitely still have some, opening this restaurant, I think that my GM fee, my one sous chef, probably fee more because I was more comfortable opening up to him in moments. But there are definitely some triggers during this opening that was just like, I always have that sense of like, I can't let down the people that trained me. Their names are attached to me, so whatever I do could reflect onto them.
I love that.
Yeah, just the fact that like, I constantly day to day have to remind myself now that like you're not going to get it all done in one day. Yeah. It's okay to leave some boxes unchecked for the next day. Yeah. Because for a long time there, I would just work myself ragged until everything was perfect and everything was done, and then I would go home. Sleeping in kitchens, sleeping in banquettes, but it's okay to not bat 1,000. Yeah.
And it doesn't ever stop.
No.
Like the business will be here tomorrow, and you'll have more stuff to do, and there'll be more boxes to check, right?
When we opened Puerta here, I think we were like coming off our first opening week, and one of the cooks was like, he's like, man, we just need to like close for 2 days and like reset. And I was like, that would be an incredible thing, but unfortunately, that's not in our cards. I was like, so we just got to keep pushing, put your head down. I was like, eat some candy, eat some candy, get back online. We're going to get through it together. There was one point in time where we were running out of tostadas because we were frying all of our handmade tortillas for tostadas, and it was just so much to keep up with. And it was like 7:30, and the one chef's like, Chef, we're going to run out of tostadas. And I was like, that's not a problem. I was like, this time last week, we were hand-making tortillas to the order at 7 p.m. Today, we just got to fry tortillas. Yeah. We're in a good spot,
Love that. What? Let's fast forward to that. Let's talk about Puerta. How did you get down here? How did you open, the restaurant? So tell us a little bit about what do you guys do here?
So I moved back. I left Charlotte in 2017 and went back to New York to work with Axel. We kind of got the opportunity to do what we always wanted to do. And ran that hotel, got a couple of awards or whatever. Nice. Then I opened another hotel for that company, and COVID came.
Gotcha.
And then I moved back down to the area in summer 2021, June 2021. All right. Tried senior living for a second, just kind of appease my fiance. She did not want to be in a new area while working 100 hours a week. Okay. So did that, but ultimately that wasn't for me. I want to get back into the restaurants. And then my buddy Mike had told me, kind of let me know secretly that he may know the people who had purchased this location, that they were looking to do a Mexican concept in it. So I was like, all right, I was like, well, if I end up leaving the senior living place, I'll definitely be looking for you to make that connection for me. Yeah. And then last fall, so September of 2022, I did end up leaving that senior living job, and I got linked up with Greg Balk and Ryan Hart, and I sat with them, had a meeting with them, just to kind of, we didn't know each other, talk about ourselves. It's kind of weird. Greg. Yeah, Greg, I don't know how we've never ran into each other back in the day because we swam in the same circles and I mean, he lived with a kid that was from my hometown in Maryland for a while, and just like even now, him and I'll be having a conversation. It's like, oh wait, you know so and so? Like, how did we never? But who knows? Wow. But yeah, we walked the space. We talked about what they wanted to do here. Kind of talked about like what I would like to do. And they were like, yeah, they were like, we'd like for you to be a part of this. They were like, what are your plans for the winter? And I was like, probably take some time off. I was like, I can find random jobs in the industry through friends. I can go help someone out on a food truck or whatever. And they were like, nah, like we want to keep you in the company. So I worked at Crunkleton all winter and most of the spring. And then myself and my GM and bar manager, we all left Crunkleton in April to kind of come over here and start focusing 100% on here. Nice. The one thing when we first set out was that we wanted to do as traditional Mexican food as humanly possible. We didn't want to do anything that was, like chi-chis or, a lot. I don't know the best way to say it, but like some of the kind of like washed over Mexican food. We wanted to make the tortillas from scratch. I've always kind of been a scratch chef. I would like to make everything that's possible by myself, even if it's making your own mayonnaise. And the hotel that I opened to Bruce was very much like that, So, and I think they loved that, was the fact that I was like, yeah, I want to make everything from scratch as possible.
That's awesome.
And then meeting my sous chef, Christian, he's originally from Mexico and then grew up in Chicago, ironically. Nice. We've had conversations for months and just, sending each other ideas. And I was like, the best way to do this is I'll make a spreadsheet. And we still run that spreadsheet now. Nice. It's kind of like when him and I talk about something, I just plug it in. So then when it came time to write the menu, I pulled a lot of stuff from there. It was basically like a chef's wish list of dishes that he wishes he could do.
Okay.
And most of those are on the menu today. There were some on there that we opened with that we've now taken off that they didn't work out for one reason or another. Yeah. But yeah, I think we stayed pretty true to what we wanted to do here.
Love that.
As it came about, Fee and I, my GM, we spoke about wanting to make this a completely gluten-free restaurant, and so far we've been successful at that.
That's awesome.
Which I think is cool. Like, there's not a lot of options out there for people with celiac, especially in this area. And I have a shellfish allergy, so I know that, like, at least for me, I'll just be like, okay, I know where to risk it and where not to, but for celiac, you can't do that. Yeah. So I think this is something cool that we can give back to that community. That's awesome. And they can come here and not worry about anything, like they can just sit down and order whatever they want.
A couple things. What are some of the most popular dishes so far that you guys have?
Well, our pick three, the pick three tacos, and comes with a side of rice and beans. I think we ran the P mix right now is probably winning the race so far out of everyone. Next would probably be our empanadas. Okay. And then probably our ceviche. We sell a lot of the pork belly chicharrones. Yeah, those are probably our big heavy hitters right there.
Perfect.
The birria empanada, I think, outsells the tinga most nights, but some nights the chicken tinga wins.
Okay, nice. So. Is there anything that you learned opening Puerta? Is there anything that, like, maybe even with all your experience, having this one, kind of spearheading it, or I guess you had the hotels that you opened, but anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, well, I've always lived and died by the principle, and especially in this industry, that like if you stop learning, then you should probably stop doing it, because this is an industry where everything's constantly evolving, constantly changing. I think even especially post-pandemic world, we've learned, like you might not be able to get salt. We hear these sort of things from our reps and stuff like, oh, there's a cornstarch shortage or there's a salt shortage. And
anything.
Yeah, and it's just the curveballs that we run into now is like you got to be able to pivot and move. Doing the whole gluten-free thing, I've realized that all my baking recipes we need kind of tweaked because that gluten-free all-purpose flour does not work the same as regular flour. I've learned different techniques with like the chilies and stuff because I've worked more with like dried chilies now than I probably ever have before. I've learned that masa can be used basically for anything, Okay. Like we're making our roux for our queso dip. We make that roux out of masa. And the mushroom tostada that we do here, I've done that mushroom sausage for years, but I always used regular all-purpose flour and regular panko or Japanese breadcrumb.
Okay.
But the gluten-free version doesn't absorb like the regular version does. So, a few weeks back, my sous chef and I were talking about it, and I was like, let's put X amount of masa in it, because the masa is going to grab that moisture right away. So for me, I think working with the masa a lot has taught me a lot, different things. I'm like, oh, I could do this with it. I can use that for it. We're making a masa tempura batter now for our new fish taco, and learning to work with people. Up in New York, because we were in the Catskills, there's definitely a different caliber of employees as far as like kitchen experience goes. And then, we have people back there right now that this might be their first kitchen job.
Nice.
So trying to figure out like during that very high point of stress of opening a restaurant, but then also trying to teach people who have maybe never done this before, or in my case, especially people that have done maybe these dishes and this food their whole lives. But like we're trying to instill a different technique into it.
Gotcha.
So trying to explain to them that process of like why instead of just cooking something in water, why are we going to cook it in stock? Or why does the bouillon that we make for our sopa de lima, why do we use whole chickens and not just bones in that? Or why do we cook at 275, not 400? Just kind of trying to teach that, and then they teach me stuff every day. Like we've really pulled this. We opened this restaurant with 4 line cooks, and that's probably the tightest crew I've ever had. We talked about numbers earlier. And what I always said, I was like, what we lack in pure numbers back there, we make up for in like fight and strength. I have a young cook that she's very, very green to the industry, but she's a natural cook. Awesome. It's like when you see a young cook hold a spoon for the first time, they're holding it properly, you're like, oh, they just naturally have this in them. And I've talked to her, and we're trying to teach her some English, and she's trying to teach me some more Spanish.
Yeah. Which, by the way, your Spanish is really good.
It's better than a lot of people would think looking at me. But yeah, just getting to work with them. We actually, we all talk about a couple of the cult classic, like Hispanic Latino films. My favorite is Blood In, Blood Out, and
it's a good one. I've seen that one.
Oh yeah. So we just actually hung a huge painting in the kitchen yesterday of all the guys from Vatos Locos.
Love that.
And when my one prep cook came in this morning, I was like, Nelson, mira. He's like, oh, it's like Ole Holmes. So yeah, this has been a lot of fun. This has been one of the smoothest openings I've done.
That's awesome.
Had a lot of fun. Still stressed out and freaked out the whole entire time, but I think that's just who I am, and we gotta learn how to deal with that.
Listen, bro. That's the piece of advice that you just said, that you're always constantly learning, and if you think you've arrived, you're far from it. That's such sage wisdom right there. That it is a constant progression, it is a constant learning. So as we wrap up, man. One piece of advice, for anybody listening, watching this on all the platforms that we have, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, for anybody, whether you're in culinary or not, just your experiences, everything that you've done growing up, just in anything you recommend to people, just, on their journey through life and success and, overcoming situations, anything that you'd recommend to people or suggest just to, keep pushing through or anything like that?
Yeah, I'd say the big thing is, just kind of piggyback off what I said earlier, is just be a sponge. Live for the moment, enjoy the moment, because you don't know what the next moment's going to bring. Listen to everyone around you. You would be shocked the number of things that I've learned from a dishwasher. Listen to everyone around you, be a sponge, absorb everything. Don't beat yourself up. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to stumble, you're going to fall in personal life, professional life, but every day just, try to be better than you were the day before. And if you try to do that, and you will do that, and you'll be all right.
Love that. Well, brother, this was awesome. This was awesome. I knew, literally, I'm not even kidding, I knew from the first time we met, I was like, dude, we got to have RJ on the pod, and just your stories, the things you were telling me about New York and what you opened, and I was like, you know what, man, I think there's just everybody has a unique story. Everybody has a story to tell, and it's just, and there's so much to learn from each other that we just need to have opportunities to tell our story. And so I love that, man. Listen, good luck to you. I know you guys came out on a strong start. Puerta has crushed it opening. I've heard nothing but good reviews and good things coming from here. And so if you guys have not come by and tried out Puerta in Elizabeth area of Charlotte, come by, check these guys out. They're doing it top notch, first class. And so come by, support all the local restaurants. And we're excited to have you on, man. Appreciate it so much. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Like, share, comment. Anybody, any of the restaurants you guys recommend or think of, let us know. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Over and out.
The restaurants you love, the food you crave, and the people that make it all happen. We tell their stories on the Paper Trails podcast with Albemarle Paper Supply.